I can give you an example. So, obviously, part of what's happening in religious phenomenology is dominance, hierarchy, perception gone mad, in a sense. So, so imagine that there's a hierarchy of people, and that you're hardwired to admire those at the top. Well, obviously, right? I mean, what percentage of magazines sold do you suppose are about celebrity culture? It's like 50%? So like primates like us, we like to gaze at high status primates. And if you take, I think they're vervets, and you figure out the vervet hierarchy, and you show low status vervets photographs of high status vervets, then they'll spend a lot of time looking at them. So part of what I'm trying to suggest here is that part of what religious phenomenology is the inbuilt sense of awe that we have when we gaze up a hierarchy and we see what's at the top. And it's not that long since we had monarchies, and in many societies you weren't even allowed to look at the king. That was certainly the case in Japan, where the emperor would be surrounded by shoguns, I think that's right, and they were authorized to kill anyone who got out of line. They just chopped them up with their swords, and any bit of being out of line was enough. So, dominance hierarchy is a very serious thing. And so, it's hard for modern people to understand the awe that must have accompanied the experience of being exposed to a monarch in a society that was fundamentally monarchical. But the Japanese believed, like right up to the end of the Second World War, that their emperor was a sun god. And you think, well, that's pretty damn weird. It's like, no, it's not. It's the fact that we don't have sun gods that's weird. Like, that's a really, really old idea, and the Japanese were just doing what virtually every culture before them had done that ever got anywhere with organization. And so there's one of the things about a god is that a god is something like what's at the top of the dominance hierarchy. Now, human beings are very, very peculiar creatures, and we're capable of high levels of abstraction. So I'm going to offer you a theory. Okay, and this is a lot of thinking compressed into a very tiny sentence. Okay, so imagine a dominance hierarchy. Okay? Now imagine that there's a set of qualities that makes it more probable that you'll get to the top of a dominance hierarchy. Now that's not that hard to imagine, right? You might think, well, intelligence might have something to do with that. Attractiveness might have something to do with that. Power. We know from studies of chimps, and this is mostly done by Franz de Waal, that, because you might think of a kind of prototypical caveman society, that it's like the caveman that looks most like a bodybuilder who's the most dominant caveman, but so to speak. But what de Waal found among the chimps was that the chimp who was at the top of the male dominance hierarchy, who remained at the top relatively stably so that he wasn't brutally murdered, say, by two chimps that were below him in the dominance hierarchy, was actually kind of a good leader in some sense, so he got along well with females in the troop and maybe even attended to their children to some degree, and he wasn't a completely unpredictable tyrant. And if he was like that, then a couple of male chimps would form a coalition, and when his back was turned at any moment, then they'd rip him to pieces. And so that's really, it's phenomenally interesting, because what it suggests is that there's a stable set of characteristics, relatively stable, that are operative within a dominance hierarchy that propels you to the top. And that's characteristic not only of human dominance hierarchies, but it's also characteristic in a way that's analogous to even chimp dominance hierarchies. So you can read Franz de Waal if you're interested in that sort of thing. He's written a lot of books about the emergence of morality in chimpanzees in particular. It's very nice work. I mean, he's observing chimps that are basically in a zoo in Holland. So, you can make the case that, they're a little not like wild chimps, but whatever, fine. They're not exactly like wild chimps, but I don't think that invalidates his research at all. So, and you can observe similar things in wild chimps. Okay, so that's kind of an interesting idea, right? There's a set of stable traits that propels you towards the top. And some of those would be indicators of biological health, like symmetry and beauty, and some of them would be, well, what other characteristics the rest of the bloody troop think are admirable? And because admirable is also a very interesting phenomenon, right? Because there are people you admire. You think, well, why are there people that you admire? And what does it mean to admire someone? And what it means in some sense is that the effect they have on you is one of wanting to imitate. And, you know, human beings, a lot of our knowledge, a tremendous amount of our knowledge, isn't propagated linguistically, it's propagated through imitation. And the probability that we were imitating each other before we developed language is extremely high. And we're also one of the few animals, maybe the only animal, that are really capable of true imitation. And it's a major league advance in terms of the transformation of information, because what it means is you can go out there and half kill yourself learning how to do something and stumble back into the tribe and recover, and then I can just watch you and embody what you did, and poof, I've got the damn information, and, you know, I didn't have to expose myself to dragons and all sorts of other horrible things that were out there in the unknown. And so, you know, we're imitating ourselves all the time. So if you admire someone, what that does is it hooks into your desire to imitate. And that's also part of an inbuilt, intrinsic biological process. Okay, now, fine, so here's what we're going to say. Dominance hierarchy. Reason for getting to the top. That produces admiration, partly because people want to be at the top of a dominance hierarchy. That's success. And we're wired to climb dominance hierarchies, because if you live at the top of a dominance hierarchy, you live longer than you do if you live at the bottom of a dominance hierarchy. Even if you factor out the effect of relative income. It's less stressful at the top. You have better resources at the top. And the top is a place, right? Because it's been around for 400 million years. It's a place. It's like a conceptual place in a sense, or it's a place that's the emergent property of social organization. But it's a place. And it's a place where people want to go.